All right, if I can have everybody quiet down. We're going to get started here. My name is Jessica Mash. I'm the chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus. We had Doug Orr here come and talk to us. Let us know how he's or who he is, and then we're going to open it up for questions after that. Everything's pretty laid back. So. There is a sign-in sheet back there if you guys want to sign in and continue to have more of this. We have Aussie next month. If you want to come to that too, and I believe it'll be here. So if you guys want to get on the email list, it's back there by the cameras. Other than that, Doug? Yep.
If I appear a little disheveled tonight, I'm still reeling from the Philadelphia loss to St. New Orleans. But I'll get through it. Born and raised in Philadelphia, blue-collar parents. Dad was a radio announcer there in Philadelphia and loved the sandwich business, so he went into that. After a while, he went into the ministry and is now a Presbyterian minister. So I grew up as a child of a minister and went to college and decided I'm going to get into law enforcement. And I did that. I did 5 years at a police department in Greenville, South Carolina, and felt that there was probably a better place to do this job because I had 5 housing projects on my precinct. And I thought, well, I'll start looking out west. And the Idaho State Police were hiring. And went out there to take the test, flew all the way out, never been to Idaho, never been to the Pacific Northwest. And took the test, 700 people took that test and there were 20 positions. But I'll never get it. Well, the week before their academy started, I got a call saying, we want you. So I flew out, got into the academy, and off I was with the state police for 5 years. And found that to be an incredibly neat experience. However, it was very slow and very boring compared to what I was used to. And Spokane PD was hiring, so a few of us decided to go over, and Spokane PD hired us. I've been with them for the last 18 years, so I've got a total of almost 3 decades of law enforcement experience. Along the way, I did get to go back and take advantage of some educational opportunities. Went ahead and got a master's degree at Gonzaga in organizational leadership, and then continued on and got accepted at Washington State University, where I completed my doctorate in criminal justice. And if that wasn't enough, someone taught me a few years ago into going back for an MBA, and I got that in human resource from St. Leo University. The good thing about that is I've decided not to leave law enforcement and engage in private activity, but I'm going to go ahead and I want to give it back to you by running for sheriff. And I felt I try to tailor my little speeches when I go to talk to people. You listen to certain politicians, you follow them around, they've got 1-2 speeches that they've got rehearsed. And I could probably write them all out, you know. And I don't want to do that when I run this campaign. I want to go and talk to the people. There's a certain issue. What's important to us tonight is our seeming loss of liberty. And what we're seeing in law enforcement today is this idea that you can go ahead and give up your liberty as long as you have safety. And unfortunately, the people who espouse that are using law enforcement to do that. If you look at what happened in Boston, the 2 guys drummed up some pressure cookers, and I'm not demeaning the loss of life there or what happened, but you saw what followed after that. And you were supposed to like that. You were supposed to enjoy that. That should have scared you. We do not live in a war zone. This is not a battlefield. We live in America. So that should trouble you. We have a document, we have the Constitution, and it's crafted by people who wrote it in such a way that to make it difficult for politicians to change the law in times of distress. The idea that some of these things should trigger a new consensus for rebuilding a society is not true. Don't buy into that. So our attitude ought to be liberty instead of safety. If we have liberty, we'll have safety. If you have safety, you won't necessarily have liberty. And that should be drummed into our recruits at our law enforcement academies. I gotta tell you, I didn't get enough of it. In the South Carolina Academy, I didn't get enough of it. The State Police Academy, I didn't get enough of it. And I got a little bit of it here in Washington State. And it took me a little while to get used to it, because when I came from back east, I would be out stopping people, and being from Philadelphia, I was a little direct. And I didn't mean to be rude, but the idea was that back east, everyone loves the cops. You never have to pay for a meal and all that kind of stuff. Come out here, and why are you stopping me? There's all these questions. And it took me a while. You laugh, but it took me a while to get used to it. And I kind of found out what it was about. And reflecting on that now, I get it. And so, what I'd like to do tonight is just take some questions from you. I realize that we don't have enough time for me to lay out everything that I want to do in the campaign, but I'll hit the 3 points. Number one, organizational justice. I think that the oversight process is completely backwards. My opponent spends a lot of time talking about the people he has to fire. My answer to that is, if you're worried about the people, don't hire them. Let's move the citizen oversight process to the front. Let's make our citizen review panel that I don't think the sheriff right now really utilizes. Pardon me?
Or lights.
Or lights, but you see, you have a method of transparency, and I hate to use it, everyone overuses that word, but you have a group of people there that could be really utilized, and they're not. But move that process to the front. If you want to have an ombudsman, have him at the front of the process. And I'll share my experience with you when I was hired back east. The police department did the internal affairs investigation on me, the background investigation, but when it came time to hire me, I had to go down to City Hall, and I had to sit in front of 7 citizens. And they interviewed me, grilled me for a good hour and a half on whether or not they wanted me to represent them in the community as police officers. Quick question.
7 citizens, were they off the street or were they with the department?
They were the equivalent to what we call a civil service commissioner out here. Civilians who were not part of the police department. And they interviewed me. And then after I left, they got to vote on me. And I was magically told that they liked you and you're going to be a police officer now. But that was the process. So I want to change that. The discipline, if you leave people you work for with an idea of expectation, and what I mean by that is that when you go to work, when you're an elected official or you're an appointed official, you set a level of expectation. People understand what your goals and your mission are. And you have to accept a little bit of failure. You have to do that. But if you can discipline them and build them back up, you have a productive member of society there working for the sheriff's department. If not, we have to dismiss them. We have to be firm and fair. Firm and fair. Recent research has showed us that we could probably have some sort of a matrix, and where you take the policy manual, just like you would codified law, where you have the expectation of behavior, and then you have a sanction. Whether in criminal law, you get it's a Class A felony, you get 10 years. In the policy manual, you've got the policy, and at the very bottom, you have a sanction assigned to that. So that there's a level of expectation at the workplace. Nobody guesses on what's going to happen to them. I want to work towards that. And that, of course, would have to be negotiated with the DSA. I'm prepared to do that, to make that work. Second leg of the stool, repeat offenders and property crimes. Our property crimes are atrocious. And I haven't looked at the 2012 numbers yet, but the 2011 numbers, comparable to our size, Spokane County, we lead the pack. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way at all. And I think my opponent is using the firing of the officers as a distraction to take away from that. And that's what's going on in our county right now. No new jail. Okay. And let me tell you why I say that. And I know we're going to talk about privacy issues tonight, so I'll say that. But we're looking at loss of privacy, we're looking at loss of property, and we're looking at the loss of our money, our prosperity, to use a good word. We're losing our prosperity. When someone comes in and tells you, and maybe 7 or 8 years ago this was probably popular to have a new jail, but now we've learned through research and through especially the criminal justice, the Regional Criminal Justice Committee has told us, here are the changes we need to have, they need to be evidence-based, and we're going to draw down the jail population. Sounds nice, and we're going to get to do that. So it's counterintuitive to say, we need a new jail. A 1,700 bed facility at $200 million a year? I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be a part of that. I'm not gonna ask you for that kind of money. It's ridiculous. And then another 0.2% off of the 1% we've already got. So you add all that together, that's $340 million over the next 10 years. And I heard my opponent just last month on the Fitzsimmons show say, we have to have this jail, and I've told the county commissioners to go ahead and put it on the ballot and blame me for it. And I am praying that they do that. Please put that on the ballot so we can vote it down and blame him for that. We can't afford that. We have better ideas. We're going to look into social impact bonds, and if I had more time, I'd explain that. But there are other revenue streams that we can explore. One police department in California, their records management system, they were very dissatisfied with what they had. And instead of going out and paying $1 million or $2 million to Motorola, they hired a programmer to do it themselves. What do we need for our department? And now they sell that program to other agencies. And their revenue off of that is $1 million every year. Why can't we do that? So, those are the three legs. I'm done preaching. I want to take your questions. I get it from my father.
You did great.
Amen.
Well, let's take, you had a question.
I want to go more than once, but here's my first one.
Okay.
Okay, so in Boston, whose responsibility is to stop that martial law activity?
And you called it martial law.
It was martial law.
It appeared that way. People were not allowed to go to their homes. They were scared to do so. That is the fault of the mayor. That is the fault of the police commissioner at the time. And you got to understand, those appointed officials back east, a lot of those people are civilians. The police commissioners are civilians. They're not really commissioned police officers. Some of them don't have any police experience. So they have to toe a certain political line. The answer to that is to have people in place who really cherish the Constitution and don't think that it can be modified over a certain period of time or that we can change it. You just can't do that. And their sheriffs back there in the East Coast are more or less keepers of the jail. They don't really have any peacekeeping or law enforcement capability. Our code here, if you read the code and you look at the duties of sheriff, it outlines the duties in the RCW, but it calls the sheriff two things, gives him two names. One, of course, is the chief law enforcement executive of the county. And the other one is conservator of peace. Look it up. Conservator of peace. You need a sheriff that's going to preserve the peace, defend the peace. I've watched the sheriff's department over the last 7 years really be reduced to nothing. You look at the jail, got that taken away from him, so he's down 218 people there. You look at the valley, and while he's still technically there, they've contracted, and they could very well have their own police department. That would knock another 100 people out of his department. He's contracted, from what I understand, and I don't know this for sure, I'm going to nail this down, but he's contracting out the civil authority to a private entity.
Explain what that is. Civil
Well,
authority.
the sheriff is empowered to serve the civil process. You know, civil papers, court orders, things like that. I think from what I heard, he's going to outsource that to a private company.
Would that include, like eviction notices and that type of thing?
Things like that.
Wow. Okay.
So, it's what you're having is a sheriff's department after that down to about 80, 90 people. I don't know that you can be a conservator of peace
Yeah.
with 90 people in a county this size. Half a million people in this county. So,
Well, he wants drones, so that would help.
and I'd like to address that.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
the year,
I came-
2012.
I came, Judy,
Absolutely.
I came prepared to talk
Oh,
about
good,
that.
okay.
Do we pay for all that when he outsources? So
Of course.
do the funds diminish in the sheriff department and that's what covers it, or do we just need extra money to outsource something?
It's a philosophy. Like the Valley prides itself in contracting out a lot of their services. And they, sometimes they like to say that because they don't want to deal with the unions, but I mean, they're just dealing with the unions by proxy anyway by hiring another agency. The county likes having that contract, and actually the Valley's getting a sweet deal. They couldn't run their own police department for the price that the county gives them. However, when you think that you're the only guy on the block, people kind of resent that. And so it's like, look, go down and talk to Rockford, talk to Waverly. those people don't like the service they're getting down there. I want to approach them with an idea that we're not the only guy in town, that we want to provide them with that service. What are their community goals? Crime is not equally distributed. I mean, they have different goals down there, so if I could go down to Rockford, Waverly, Lake Tahoe, and maybe even Spangle and say, have we looked at any kind of consolidation here to where we could have a combined service? There are other contract agencies that have what they call exchanges. And they have these different entities that they deal with, and they might have 2 mowings equal to street cleaning. And so at the end of the year, if you've used 4 mowings and you want to trade it in for street cleaning, you can do that and have a lower cost. Maybe we can do that with some of our crime. And that would be attractive to some of those agencies down there where they're not having to fork up $100,000 a year for a deputy they might see once a week.
You might want to talk about regionalization, because that makes you sound like you want to go regional.
No, I don't.
I know,
No.
but I'm just
In
telling
fact,
you.
I want to just do the opposite. I want to take a deputy for a combined service contract down there and put him down there. Maybe he may not have to be a resident officer, but just to go down there, work between those cities, sit around, drink coffee with those people, be known to them, like the old days. You know, there's some personality to our sheriff's office. And he could be there and handle those things. Right now, you've got a lot of the deputies handle a lot of the calls right outside the incorporated area there, and they have to drive all the way down to Lake Tahoe to handle a call. And again, there's not much work down there, but when there is, they gotta drive to do that. There should be a resident guy down there. So regionalization, let me talk about that. I believe, as the chief of police does, that we each have unique responsibilities, and that 2 agencies should be separate. There should be some sort of consolidation when there needs to be, but as far as the agency goes, I have no intention of combining or managing a metro regionalization police department.
And why do you think that would be a bad idea?
Well, people don't want that, I don't think. They know that the costs are so upfront, but you're creating a huge government entity. And probably you'd have to fight it out, but I mean, the sheriff, if something like that was going to happen, the sheriff should be over it. But I believe that we have unique roles in the community, and the city has their own problems and issues and their own roles, and they need to deal with those. But the county sheriff is a person that is looked at completely different than an appointed official.
You definitely don't want to consolidate the police power, is the way I look at that. It's
Agreed.
dangerous.
Yes.
So you've been in Spokane for quite a period of time. The sheriff ran unopposed last time. Is there something that's happened in that period of time that made you say, or didn't happen, that made you say, okay, I'm getting in, I mean, is there some either deficit on his part or some action, or why, I guess I'm saying, why are you running?
Well, I guess the number one reason, I think, is that, well, let me answer that with a question, then I'll answer your question. I would say there's probably 1,000 law enforcement officers in this county, maybe 700, 800, and then with the correctional people, we've got about 1,000. What would you say is the approvability rating of the sheriff right now within those 1,000 people? Would you give him 80%, 90%,
To be
100%?
honest, I bet most of the people don't know who the sheriff is.
No, I'm talking about law enforcement.
Oh, law enforcement?
The 1,000 law enforcement officers in this county, if you were to round them all up and survey all of them, what approval rating do you think that they would give their sheriff?
It would be a wild guess, I have no idea.
Give me a number.
80%.
Okay. You're horribly disconnected.
I told you,
I
I'm
would-
taking a wild guess.
Well, and I don't say that, I'm not slapping you here, I'm saying that I would give his approval rating right now in law enforcement right around 25%, if that.
And how do you come up with that number?
You know, I'll say it to you in 2 words, transformational leadership. When you go to work for him, that's what you do. What Spokane County needs inside that agency is a leader who's going to go to work for them. The idea that you manage by authority and you manage by exception, you're only going to create followers. You need to be able to go to work and create leaders and inspire people and motivate them. They work harder, longer, and happier.
And so the 25%, is that, I guess, on your part, or is there some
Those are people that don't know any different.
survey, or
I mean,
is
they
there
just like come into
something
work and they'll just, because he ran unopposed, they don't know
No,
any
but I'm
different.
saying, where are you getting the 25%?
She's
Was there some
questioning your numbers.
Was there some survey that was taken?
There was
about?
not.
Okay.
But
So
they
that's
can't
probably
answer
your
on that.
estimation.
But if you were to go have coffee with people and sit down and sit with the officers like we do and talk, I mean, I put it right around 25%.
Yeah, and I'm not trying, I'm not questioning whatever, I'm just,
That's the feeling right now, and that's what's changed.
The police union is against it, isn't it?
Well, why would you say the police union is against it?
Because I've read that somewhere.
Well,
I think
Who is
they're
the
pretty,
police-
they're
let me ask you
pretty
that. Who's the police
strongly
union?
opposed to this,
it's made up of all the deputies. So it's, are you gonna say it's the deputies that don't care for his leadership style, or are you gonna say it's the union? I mean, they're one and the same.
I know.
So, okay.
And have you mentioned about your training and your education. Have you had administrative experience before?
Not in that sense, no, sheriff or police chief, no. And my
Have you
opponent,
ever done like hiring or firing of people before?
when I was president of the police union back east, I did that there, and I was also president of the police union over in Idaho. So we would hire contract people to do fundraising for us. And that's one thing that's different out here. The unions out here are very negotiation centric. Back east, we were more than that. We ran the police athletic league. We were out in the community, you know, doing fundraisers for disabled people and things like that. So the unions out here are a little different. So you have,
Well, I want to go back to the Boston comments, because I think we were all horrified to see what happened back there. But I'm equally horrified to watch some of our news footage of how our law enforcement in this town treat our people when they're approaching a house that they think might be dangerous, or you've got 59 officers in SWAT gear. And, I mean, it looks like you're being invaded.
Did you?
It's just,
and it's
frightening.
not necessarily a demonstration, but it's also an attitude. You know.
That's what I'm getting
How many of you
at.
remember
I
the
just
news
don't
story?
think people like the police anymore.
Well, the news story 2 weeks ago where the homeowner was at his house and the deputies ended up at the wrong house. And did you look at the sheriff's comments? Okay. When you say stuff like that, and there's nothing wrong with explaining how the deputy ended up there. He got certain information that led him to this place, and it just happened to be wrong. But to completely be dismissive of the homeowner, there's nothing wrong with saying, but the homeowner, even though the deputy had what he thought was the right information, but he was at the wrong place, the homeowner was at the right place, and he was doing the right thing. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. You're not demeaning the officer's actions at all, but the homeowner was in the right place, and the way the homeowner acted was appropriate. So when you say, oh, put yourself in the deputy's shoes, all that person hears is, oh, so I'm a liar. And I got to tell you, I spent some time with the Creech family the other night, just trying to get an understanding. And even though we can't go back and deal with that criminally, we can't go back and deal with that civilly. And so I asked them, going forward, what is the message I need to get out there? And what I came away with is this idea that the sheriff has to be completely involved in the process. Now, there's certain things you can't tell the family because of the criminal investigation, but there needs to be contact early on in a tragedy like that. They did not speak to the sheriff for 5 months. We can't
Does
have that.
everybody know the Creech thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so and I gotta tell you, I've heard cops say at the end of their 30 years, you know, well, this city or this county's taking a chunk of my life. You sit down with those people and you say, man, the county's taking a chunk of their life. And even though there may not have been anything legally wrong, anything civilly wrong, but there's a loss of life there, and it was at the hands of law enforcement. And there should be some contact with the sheriff's office early on to make those people feel represented. It's a difficult situation. I got to say, Alan said it best sitting at the table. He said, you know, my father has gone out to that greenhouse and he's had to put out fires, he's had to fight with vagrants, he's had to do this and this, and then he comes out one night and he's killed by police. You know, and to hear it that way, you know, there's a great deal of sympathy. So, without taking a position on it, and of course I wasn't there, but to hear that, we talked about unmarked cars and things like that.
Oh, yeah, the unmarked cars, because I worked with the Creech family. And this 1970 committee hearing said unmarked cars were not to be used in patrol because, in neighborhood patrols because of what happened, okay? And Ozzie refused to admit that he was wrong. He said, I have that authority, the lawyers over there have said so. Matt Shea, our representative, who is a constitutional lawyer, said, no way, I've read the committee reports, that is wrong. He does not have the authority to use unmarked cars for regular patrol. And that really bothers me when you're a rule of law person and you don't follow it.
Well,
And in light of too, I think when you couple that with the trend of bad police activity in the country, that it's actually very scary now to be a citizen. You have unmarked cars, you have all these stops in all these different states that are, where people have been molested basically. So really, I mean, you have citizens that are terrified of the police.
And
that's
those,
horrible.
well, those situations are infrequent, even though they're more sensationalized now.
Right.
But.
Infrequent is an irrelevant term if that was you though.
Exactly, exactly. But the point we need to take from that is that as police work evolves, we need to make sure our protections evolve with it. And that's why I'll talk about drones here in a second. The unmarked car issue, we got to stop using laws to justify the way we're doing business. And so I have an unmarked car. I'm a detective though. I don't routinely make traffic stops.
Right.
It's equipped in case I need to, but I don't do that as a. So now your police vehicles are no longer Crown Victorias, they're Chevys, they're Tauruses, so people don't know anymore.
No.
So it's something I think that Matt Shea had a good idea. I think it went rather quickly, so it didn't get law enforcement support, and I don't really know why, but it's something we can really approach again, I think. And it's going to have little effect on law enforcement. We have very few unmarked cars that we have out there right now doing enforcement of abilities and things like that, so I don't think it would be a horrible loss.
How do you see your role as the sheriff interacting with the police chief, and where does that play out as far as?
Well, I think, number one, I'll say this. It would be, in fact, I don't know of another county in the United States of America that would have a police chief who has a doctorate and a sheriff who has a doctorate. That would be, I think that'd be a great thing. However, I think it's unfair to put the pressure on him to have him pick between Ozzie and me. From what I know about the chief, and I've met him several times and dealt with him personally for a month when I filled in at the Public Information Office, he could work with anybody. He's that kind of a guy. And what we've seen here at our police department is that some very sane decisions, especially when we've had some weird things going on in the last 5-7 years. He's really brought a level of sanity to our department, and I'm very proud to work for him. So knowing what I know of him, we work well together. But I don't want to place any pressure on him and have him publicly have to say, well, you can't do that.
No, I'm saying if you were elected to be the sheriff, how would you see your role and your interaction? If you're the chief law enforcement officer in the county, you're technically over that police chief, because he's a chief over a city within your jurisdiction. So where do you see your interaction with that?
As far as a confrontation?
No. I just mean as far as your role of administering over that, I don't know.
In an
how-
emergency management situation, the sheriff calls the shots. Those roles are set out, of course, in an emergency management policy where each police department has their own independence and they act independently of the sheriff. But there's never, to my knowledge, there's never been something where we've had to have an adversarial, role.
Yeah, maybe I need to think about how to phrase that question. I don't mean adversarial.
But my role
Well, I
is.
think he answered it in saying that he works with him now. They get along very well, and he can work with him.
We really
So-
speak each other's language, so.
Well, maybe another way to phrase it, her question is, at this point in time, you work for him.
I do.
How would that affect you now working over him?
I wouldn't be working over him, I'd be working with him.
Does that work?
Go ahead.
No, do you have a way of turning the ship around? I mean, I worked across the street from, he happened to be black, a guy with handcuffs behind his back over on, it's a crime district, Monroe, Indiana district. Anyway, these cops, I kid you not, there were 3 of them attending him, and he was already cuffed. And this car pulls up, one of them jumps out, and he pops his trunk, and he grabs his semi-automatic, and it was the craziest thing. And so then when you see that in person 7 years or so ago, and then we went through a period of, was it 4 or 5 people killed, I understand that there are times that it can't be avoided, but is there a way to turn hot shots around and
Well,
get them to
again,
realize there's
the situation you described we certainly don't know what that called for. In an instance where the officer probably pulled his rifle out was a situation where he probably needed a long-distance shot.
No, it was a half a block away, and then I forgot to say this. So the next day, because we were in this little alcove, this little boutique, and this crumpled up carbon copy paper had rolled in, and the girl I worked with, she opened it up, and it said that he had been arrested for they thought he had a weapon, or like a knife. It didn't say gun, but it was like something like that. So I thought I just, to me, I know you weren't there, but the guy has handcuffs with his arms behind his back, and a young officer, he was just rearing to go. He was looking for a fight.
Well, perhaps there was a second suspect outstanding that they were looking for. I'm going to have, if I'm controlling someone, I'd like to have an officer covering me, just in case the other guy doesn't come back, because I'm directed on the guy I'm arresting. So there's a lot about that situation you just don't know. And there have been situations where you have to have a long gun for a long shot.
So let's say that were true, with all the shootings that were going on for a while, and no way for the community to find a check and balance point. Is there a way that can be changed that's realistic with the current?
Well, I think what you've seen in the city, and I don't want to be a spokesman for the city tonight because I'm running for sheriff. Right now, the sheriff is basically the ombudsman of the county. I mean, that's the oversight you have.
Right.
I don't think that's enough. I think there should be some sort of independent counsel. As far as what you're talking about, when you say all these shootings, do we have more than any other agency in the country or any other jurisdiction, do you think?
I think that's like saying, I think I'm a good Christian because I'm better than that person. I mean, really, do the stats matter? The idea that a civil servant wants to serve the majority of the people and isn't getting so jaded and angry and all that as they go, that they start believing that they are God or whatever.
Well, here's the prevailing thought right now. The prevailing thought is this idea that we want to change the officers from thinking they're a soldier or a warrior, that they're in a battlefield. And that was drummed into me at age 21. You're a warrior. You're on a battlefield. You got to protect yourself and you got to survive. And in the shooting scenario that I was in many years ago, it went that way. I need to survive. I need to defend myself. But we don't live in a battlefield. The officer certainly has the right to protect himself. He should see himself as a servant and to protect somebody else's life and his own. But to think that you're out on a battlefield, this is not Afghanistan, this is not Iraq, this is the United States, and we live in the beautiful community of Spokane County. So it's
So
just
how
an
do you
attitude.
propose to change that way of thinking around?
It's already occurring. I think you're seeing, there was an article, Sue Rohr, she's the head of training over in Burien right now. And she had and it was kind of a flowery way of saying it, but just that we need to dismiss the warrior mentality and go to a more servant type atmosphere. And that allows the officer, pardon me?
The motto, serve and protect.
Exactly, and that allows the officer to protect himself, but not the idea that he's got to kill the German, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, that there's this war, that we've got to fight.
Well, and I think what you're hearing is, and you're kind of wanting to hear from some stats from us, but I think the sentiment that you're hearing is that in general, we don't get that police officers, sheriff, politicians in any way, shape, or form are servants anymore. And I think what you're getting is that citizens in general feel intimidated, liberty stolen. It just feels very. We came from California almost 5 years ago, and I remember the first couple of years we were here. We were in Southern California in some pretty big. We lived near San Bernardino, and if you know anything about California, San Bernardino was like for a couple of years the murder capital, and we lived about 30 miles from there. So we were used to, we saw stuff. But when we came here, it was like, okay, this guy just got killed by the cops, and that guy just got killed by the cops. And it's like
We should laugh.
it was and I just know that I don't know what it is like in other places, but if it is like this in other places, It is making citizens feel like you're not our servants. And I think that's our biggest downfall right now with politicians, police officers, anybody that works for the government. We're sick and tired of doling out money and feeling like you're not our servants. So,
Point taken.
Well said.
Well said.
I would say it actually goes beyond that. There are a lot of people who are suspicious of police officers. They don't trust police officers. They do not respect police officers. And it's only the threat of force that gets them to even say have a conversation, basically. Or the perceived threat of force, I should say.
And I think some of that is changing with, you heard about the force continuum the officer
Yeah.
uses, okay. And that may seem logical when you look at it, but sometimes it actually exacerbates or escalates the situation.
There's no place to de-escalate, really.
Right, and we're fixing that. I think the attitude across the country now is to abandon that model and to go to a more what they call an amendment model, where the officer is considering the situation based on how he would be judged in court, rather than this continuum where, well, if the guy does this, I gotta do this. If the guy does this, I gotta do this. And, you know, so I think that's changing. Well, let me go back here. No, I'll get you.
This might be kind of off the wall, but it's my pet peeve right now, and that's politicians or any public servant that takes the oath of office and he just throws it off over their shoulder and walks off and forgets about it. How do you handle a person that you know has broken the oath of office, which I understand is perjury? How would you handle that?
You know, an officer who lies?
Patty Murray walks into here, we all know she's broken, you know, her oath. How would you handle that?
Well, of course, if they've committed something criminal, then.
Was it perjury criminal?
Pardon?
Are you referring to test-a-line?
I don't know, are you talking about a criminal act?
Well, is perjury a criminal act?
Yes.
If it's done under oath and in a court,
Only if it's in the court.
but the judge finds that.
So if one of your deputies takes the oath of office and breaks that oath of office, just ignores that oath of office.
Give me an
just
example.
Well, anything where they want to,
Perjury, because you promised to.
Like that President of the United States.
you know,
Just an old.
Police officers have a very narrow scope. They determine whether or not probable cause exists, and then they make an arrest, and that's their duty. It's the duty of the prosecutor's office to charge that person. It's a very narrow scope, so you
well,
can give me
they
an
do something
example.
that, if they give an oath to support the Constitution, and then they do not support it for some reason, like just taking your gun away, coming up, knocking on your door and saying, I'm taking your gun away. Or anything, how would you handle that?
I guess you're talking about the confiscation of weapons during Katrina. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it could be.
Yeah, that'd
I'm
be a
just
good
in
one.
general.
You can talk about that.
Let's go there.
Yeah.
Judy and I had this conversation. What he's talking about is during a natural disaster, the National Guard came in and went house to house, and in some circumstances confiscated weapons.
Almost just the army.
Well, every door they knock.
I don't know the extent of it. I got to profess my ignorance. I don't know the
You
extent
can
of it.
live there, give them a break.
But what I'm trying to say is they took those guns just took them,
Unconstitutional.
okay, unconstitutionally.
And they did.
And there was no redress for that down there. And I can see if there's an abandoned house and officers are searching to save someone's life and they see unattended weapons, I don't see any problem with holding those for the property owner and where they can get those back. But in a situation where you just go door to door and confiscate it, that's unconscionable. It won't happen in this town.
So to follow that question up then, what is the county sheriff's job when the federal government comes in and does something like that?
There we go.
I was going to be asked this question anyway.
Because you have more power than the feds.
Pardon me?
You have more power than the feds.
If
If
you
choose to. Sheriff has more power.
Oh, we're helping you, aren't we?
Just in your county.
I don't know of an instance where that's happened in this state. I think we need to be proactive. The sheriff needs to be proactive, and he needs to meet, I think one of the things I'm gonna do, and I don't know what my opponent has done, but I think after taking office, I think there needs to be a serious conversation with the governor over the role of the National Guard in this county and in other counties in the state of Washington.
We don't have time to talk to them. They're here taking our guns. What are you gonna do, Sheriff? That's the question.
I don't see that as,
If it happened, what would you do?
Judy, let's back off, Judy.
No,
Let's
you're
get-
dancing around.
Let's build to that point.
We see that.
Doug.
We know that's.
okay.
Doug, let me ask you, let me get off that one.
All right.
Let's get to
Oh,
that
you're
one.
gonna give me a break, huh?
DHS, Department of Homeland Security, they have lots of operations in Washington State.
In Spokane.
So, what do you know about that?
About their operations.
Yeah, what's going on here in Washington State with DHS?
My exposure to them right now is through, child exploitation. So I work with them dealing with child pornography, and that's simply because they work interstate. That's my experience with them there. What they're doing is, what they've done here in the past few years is set up these fusion centers for intelligence. A recent review of those fusion centers showed them to be of very little value. And I get emails from them probably once a day, and I just don't, it's just a bureaucracy to me. What bothers me is, you go down to the federal courthouse and you see those vans out there, Federal Protective Services, Homeland Security. What is that? You see a guy go out there and get in there with, some DBUs and a sidearm, and what's he doing, A bunch of my buddies were downtown during a parade. A couple of detectives, they worked some overtime, and they were downtown, and one of these Homeland Security guys was out walking around, and he grabbed some guy, and it was like a pedestrian violation. He was shaking him down with this pedestrian violation, and my buddy said, I don't think he can do that. It's just, he doesn't have any authority to do that. This is a city street, this is a city code, this is
Terry stuff.
terror stuff. We keep finding out things, and we don't ask a lot of questions, and I think you need a sheriff that's going to ask those questions in a public venue. I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example. Joe, lost my train of thought. I know what it was, the drones thing. Use of drones by the federal government. When they were asked about that, there's just a couple instances where we tested it out. Well, when you finally file the Freedom of Information Act, you find out there have been 500 attempts at using these drones, and where they were used for different police departments, and one was an Indian reservation, things like that. So your government isn't telling you the truth. So you need a sheriff. You need a sheriff that's going to ask those questions and ask them publicly.
They're leasing them to the local police. Get real here.
Well,
We know that.
To the sheriff's department?
Not in this county, but in some counties.
So I had a question with something you brought up there a second ago. You mentioned someone downtown stopping, doing a pedestrian stop. Somebody said terrorism.
Terry stop. It's called
Right.
Terry stop.
Right, so
You know what
we were talking about emergency management a little while ago, and you said the sheriff's over the police in an emergency management situation. In a terrorist situation, where does the federal government, the FBI, whatever, fall in that jurisdiction inside of a county?
Say that Martin Luther King
If it's
parade
a-
bomb had really,
Well, see, and that's a local crime. I don't think the federal government was able to really prove that, that's a local crime where this guy has committed, he's manufactured the bomb in this state, it's a state crime.
I'm saying something beyond that point. Boston happens here, and the federal government comes in and says, we're locking it down while we search for the terrorists. Where is their jurisdiction versus yours in this situation?
Well, do they have jurisdiction in something like that?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking you.
Would you stop it?
Will you keep your old?
If they're fulfilling the law, then why would I want to stop them?
That's good.
Well, I need to discuss this.
Tell me about that.
But I guess, if there's federal.
I'm asking where are they in the
federal
chain
law
of command on an
enforcement, they have
emergency management of any
legitimate-
form?
They do have legitimate enforcement capabilities. You would agree with that, right?
Based on, I agree, but based on what?
Well,
If they said
I'll agree with you
might
that
go
we
house to
have
house
horrible
searching houses,
over-criminalization
stop
of federal law right now.
Yeah.
That we do. But they do have, I work with them on criminal exploitation of child exploitation. That's a legitimate enforcement
Right.
ability for federal law enforcement, I think. I can't simply investigate something in New York with texting a girl here in Spokane. I can work with them.
Well, across the
But-
state lines, that makes sense. But, they have a very narrow and limited scope as to what their jurisdiction is, correct?
They should.
Well,
So
let me
what-
add to that, Michael, though. Do you agree, or do you know about that we are in Spokane is within 100 miles of the border, and we're a non-constitutional zone, the 100-mile border zone?
I've
Border
heard
security
people
zone.
talk about that.
Yeah, have you researched it?
A little bit, and when I worked up in, you talking about the border checks up there?
No, I'm talking about that within 100 miles of all of our borders, the
They
outside
declared
borders.
it, it's not constitutional. I mean,
But it's been
Not
back since the
constitutional.
You want to add to what I'm saying? I'm sorry.
Well, I think what you're talking about is the old Blue Lightning thing where they deputized a whole bunch of officers and you could
No,
search
no,
people.
drones,
No.
100-mile border, they have drones, listening posts. It's a deal. It's
This
Department
is
of
what
Homeland
allows
Security.
them the authority to set border checkpoints up 50 miles from borders for border patrol to stop people for no reason.
Without
All
warrants.
that kind of stuff. within
I've heard of that, but I've not seen it.
Well,
Like,
it's,
is that, I mean, I don't wanna say more than what I know,
It goes all the way
but
back to 1952 and keeps adding on to by layers. You know, and that's what we're working with now. That's why I was asking about your understanding of DHS and what's going on here in Washington State. It's not unlike what's going on in Montana and other states that are border states either. But your jurisdiction seems like, it really seems like you don't understand what's going on here as far as them coming in and saying, Sheriff, you need to go home.
and I think that's why you need a strong sheriff and a strong sheriff's department.
Well, that's why I
Simply whittling
asked
it
you
down
before.
to 80 officers, 80 deputies is gonna handle that kind of force?
No, and
You
maybe
got
that's
a
I
why,
gotta depend on you.
People
maybe
with
that's why we
guns.
have only 8.
I've gotta depend on a well-armed populace.
You ever think, Doug, that maybe that's why we only have 80, because they can just go home and let the feds take over and not get in the way?
Well, I feel a little differently about that simply because I'm not seeing it. I keep hearing people talk about it, but I'm not seeing it.
They felt that way in Germany too, didn't they?
They didn't.
If you would guarantee you would keep your oath of office, I'd feel a lot more comfortable, but it sounds like to me, you're not guaranteeing me you're gonna keep your oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
I disagree with you.
I don't hear it, I'm sorry, but I don't hear it.
Well,
haven't-
let me talk about this.
dancing around
Let me
it.
talk about this.
And I don't mean to be this way, but, God, I'm just, this whole thing that's going on in this country is really irking me. And everybody's dancing around their oath of office, and they ought to be hung. But that's just my humble.
We're a rough crowd.
I didn't expect this to be easy. And it shouldn't be easy. It shouldn't be easy for someone.
No,
But
see,
a step in the right direction is stuff like this.
Yes.
You look at this bill, a very reasonably drafted legislation on unmanned aerial vehicles. And this is drafted by not only Republicans, but just as many Democrats too.
Yeah.
Did it
Now-
pass?
It's gonna be proper this year. The one thing you need to know though, and this is a question for the sheriff next month when he comes, is why is WASPIC opposing this bill? Why is the Washington Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs opposing this bill?
Isn't the sheriff the chair of that right now?
He's the
They
president
want
of it right now.
power, Because they want control.
This is the drone bill, and it's drafted in a way to where, you know, I recognize the great things that we can do with those drones as far as private ventures go, and private entities should be able to do that. But when you talk about law enforcement, and I'm going to say this, and listen to me when I say it, law enforcement collecting non-criminal information on U.S. citizens.
Right.
When you say it that way, it makes sense, okay? We need a law to outline the duties of law, or the restrictions we can have on law enforcement when dealing with those drones. The hallmark of a mature police agency is one that can limit itself. And when you have, and the idea here is that the reason why, I tell you, the reason why WASPIC is opposing this is they say that in the past, we've always allowed police agencies to use the technology as it evolves, and then the Supreme Court comes in and says whether or not that was good or bad or whether it was lawful. That is a wait-and-see attitude, and I'm not a wait-and-see sheriff. This is something that needs to be handled right now. It's no different than attaching a GPS in the bottom of someone's car. It's just some reasonable, you know who called me to ask me to testify about this? They read my op-ed in the Spokane about liberty and about reasonable searches, and they said they're going to be pushing this bill. You know who called me?
No.
The ACLU.
Okay, good.
Doesn't that make
It's getting
crazy sense?
strange. No, but it
Right.
happens more than you think on
Yeah, it
civil
does.
liberties.
So-
Yeah.
You've got a lot of support for this. Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, they all want this done.
Yeah.
And for some reason, WASPIC is saying no.
Yeah, if we actually look at results, we're working with the wrong.
So, and this is reasonable. This is something that everybody can like. This isn't just, you
It's new
know,
technology. It needs control.
so I'm for this, and I'm going to go testify. If the ACLU, I'm going to go testify for it.
So,
Just as a,
You got
just as
some
a
points.
note of record, the ACLU has actually been very instrumental in exposing this 100-mile border. So if you look it up, you might want to actually go on their website. They actually are, we normally disagree with them on everything, but they actually
No,
have
that is
exposed
not
us.
true anymore on civil liberties.
Oh, I know, yeah.
But they were the first.
In the
Has
past,
it, before I go to you guys, has anyone that wants to ask a question, not ask when they ask it?
I'm still waiting for you to answer mine.
Go ahead.
All right. I want to know, you know, outside of you wanting another job with the public office at the public dole, well, you know, why would you be nothing more than just a changing of the guard, a new hat on the table, you know, a new pair of boots on the desk, you know, somebody just a new face?
Your pocketbook.
Oh, well, all right.
$340 million in the next 10 years.
I
You're not gonna get
understand,
it.
and I do understand that, and you've got to have, you know, something to run on, a little bit bigger than that too. But, I mean, that's a sincere and important issue to me too. But you can't have just a new face. And we just, you know, there has to be, you have to grab hold of the angst of the people of Spokane and say, this is why you need a new sheriff. This is why you need something new. And, you know.
Are you happy with the property crime rates in this?
Are you asking me personally? No. My son and I had both of our cars stolen within 3 months apart. So how's that for an answer? I mean, that hit us personally.
What's being done about it now?
Well, what's being done about it, they just ask us to fill out a form.
Listen, if I told you, and this is where you can make the distinction between me and my opponent, is, let's use Daytona Police Department. They partnered with Dr. David Farrington to go after this property crime issue. And what they did is they researched a way to compartmentalize 4 different profiles on burglars. And they validated, they tested the system, they validated it. They were able to save the Daytona Police Department $1.6 million. The return to the citizens was $20 million. Why can't we do that here?
Well, on something like, wow, car theft? Like, we're
Look,
number
this is
6
all property
in the nation.
crimes.
Well, yeah.
They reduced, they increased their clearance rate 400%. Why can't we do that here?
We can, if people would just.
It's not being done.
All right, well, my concern,
demanding.
yeah, those concerns are real to me, all of them. But number one is what you mentioned, is all the confrontations that all law enforcement officers have with the public, and the law enforcement officer escalates that confrontation into an act of violence one way or another. That's the biggest
That does
issue.
not happen all the time.
It happens
No,
so
it
often.
doesn't.
It happens so often.
It's infrequent, though. It's sensationalized.
Well, all right.
But it's infrequent.
That's why it makes the news.
It's, I mean, if you were to watch TV tonight, and you probably count maybe 1,000 acts of violence, I mean, that's way more than what we actually have in this country. But what I think you're touching on is an idea that the officers do need to escalate the situation rather than escalate it. And as we go through this process that we're going through here in Spokane, it needs to leak over into the county. We're having great strides. It's not going to happen overnight, but it has to happen through training.
No, I agree. It has to happen through training.
But it's infrequent.
So Doug,
Yes.
okay, let's turn it around a little bit again. There are thousands, right now, there are thousands of police officers and sheriffs in the United States that are very concerned about this federal escalation and overreach inside of their counties and their states. They've joined organizations like Oath Keepers, okay? They've joined organizations like CISPA, you know, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, to have some unity and to have some clear directions to understand what happens in other areas so that people who have overreach in their areas can take those experiences and come back in. And I hear a rumor that you're not interested in understanding what those people are doing or even joining those groups to understand what they do.
When Sheriff Mack came to last year, it was 2 years ago,
Yeah.
who was it that put an ad in the paper asking everybody to come and see him? Me.
We didn't know you did.
Cost me $1,000 to do that. And
Cost us almost
I picked the most liberal rag there was. I put it right in the Inlander. And I said, you guys need to come out and hear this guy. So where was our sheriff?
That you would align with?
Pardon me?
Is that a group that you would align with?
I would sympathize with, yes.
No, I mean, would you align with them? Would you
Would
sign?
Are you
all
talking about
these?
signing,
Signing
okay.
oath
That's
keepers.
exactly what we're talking about.
Let me address that for a second. When Judy, and I've seen it before, and I read it when Sheriff Matt came to town. And I believe everything on that.
I'm not familiar with the pledge. Can you kind of surmise the pledge?
The idea is that the sheriff takes an oath of office, he's taking the oath to uphold the Constitution.
Right.
And by doing that, the oath keepers have outlined about 20 points.
I thought it was
Eight-
10, but.
10 they've enumerated 10 points.
They're constitutional.
And all of them are very, very well-founded ideas. What happens, though, is when you ask a person to sign that, you put them in a box. And if I was to sign that, I'd have everyone in this room voting for me. And that's probably about it. So I've looked at the material put out by
When you
people
say
who...
that's about it, why?
Well, maybe some
You mean
more.
everybody else wouldn't?
Well, here's what happens is, the other people demonize you. They want to line you up with people who want to shoot federal officers and people who want to break into jails and liberate people who are under orders by sheriffs that they don't agree with. I mean, really, they do. They pick you for that.
Right.
So I don't want to get put in a box
Well,
in an electoral process. Because that's what they would do.
but here's my personal fear. When I first physically met Sheriff Knezovich years ago, fairly new to this process, I had written to him because I understood, I just learned back then, years ago, about how our country's divided into 10 sections for FEMA. And that I understood that Washington, Idaho, and Oregon, and Alaska were section 10. And that Gregoire, being the governor, was in charge of those, and that she had given that jurisdiction control over to our sheriff. And I wanted to confirm that. I wanted to learn about this. So I wrote to him twice, and I never got a response. We wound up having an event that he attended, and I slid up to the table and sat down next to him, and I said, Ozzy, I said, my name's John Charleston. I stuck my hand out, shook his hand. I said, hey, I said, could I get a real email address for you? I've written to you a couple times, I'm not getting any response, so obviously it's not getting through. And he started to give me his email address, then he stopped and he says, what did you write about? And I told him what I just told you. And his response to me, somebody he'd never seen in his life, was, what's FEMA? That just raised the hair on my arms, and I just slithered out of that conversation. I mean, you know, and this is a guy who's taken your stand. In fact, he avoided even having eyesight with Sheriff Mack when he was here. He wouldn't talk to him, he wouldn't meet with him. We set up a meeting, he avoided it. And I don't get it.
Well, I wasn't afraid to put my name to
taking that
it.
stand either, because frankly, that doesn't leave me with any other choice. I'm just looking at this going, you know, I'm a big undervote.
Were you there when he spoke at the Lincoln Day dinner?
At that dinner with
Yeah.
Matt Kemp?
Wasn't that the most wonderful speech you ever heard in your life? There was nothing about that that was odd or
We were the
crazy. Or
organizers to get them there.
even the Ron Paul people, they were a little tipsy, but they were in it, man. They were like,
They were not tipsy. Watch yourself in this room.
you know, I was one of the people that wanted to deal.
Hey, listen, I'm Ron Paul, I may have been.
I think we're all wrong.
Wasn't it a shame? Wasn't it a shame what happened to the Ron Paul people in 2012?
Oh my gosh.
Or 28 or
Actually, let's
28.
talk about sheriff.
Good,
So we talked about property crimes,
right.
which I think is a symptom of the drug problem that we have in the county.
It's related, yes.
What kind of ideas do you have to curb the meth problem that we have here, oxycodone problem that we have here, gangs coming in that are contributing to all of these problems?
The crime reduction, or the I should say programs, the rehabilitative programs that we're seeing that are being offered right now that are effective, they're working for people who are on drugs, but they're not really working for people who are involved in property crimes. I'm going to fix that. We're going to try to find a better program that focuses on the individual rather than this cookie cutter approach. And what really needs to happen, you've heard about this Criminal Justice Commission that was impaneled to solve some of these problems. And it was really pretty the way that it all came out, and here's what we need to do. What's at the crux of the matter right now is a screening process for who's going to get early case resolution. There's a problem with the prosecutor's office. They have some concerns, some very validated concerns. But number one, for someone to change, they got to be willing to change. So you just can't pump a whole bunch of people through a program, and it's going to be horrible. Where it's going to be, the cost is going to be phenomenal. So it has to be someone who wants to change, someone who we can help and produce into a better citizen. We want to do it first with the people that are in jail, and then if we can help other people that aren't in the system, we can do that too. But first to draw down that jail population, make it less expensive right now for us. That's what I'm going to do initially.
So when you have addicts that are, knocking off the neighbor's house to get the money for their next fix, where is that program gonna come in until they've broken a law that they've been caught for and they've been incarcerated?
It's going to come at the entry level, at the jail. They're going to be given a chance to enter that early case resolution program.
How are you gonna catch more people than have been caught now then?
Just a second.
Because
How are you going to catch more people? Well, that's that program I explained to you, that poverty crime program, increasing their clearance 400%.
But for those who are in jail,
Pardon?
if I understood correctly, you said it's a program administered to those who are incarcerated.
Well, you just talked about how we're going to get more people in jail. How we're going to arrest more people.
I'm saying that I'm an emergency ambulance, and there is a horrific meth problem in our county. And I see people come in strung out all the time, and they'd like to have some assistance getting off their addiction, but there's no place for them to go. So
Well, if it's associated with a crime, then of course they're going to go to jail.
well, using the drug is a crime, but I'm just using the drug as a crime in and of itself. I'm saying people, they're not under arrest, they didn't come in by
I
the
do not want to
police.
fill up our jail with drug users.
And I don't wanna have any more county programs, quite frankly, to fund everybody getting on drugs.
Right.
I'm sorry you're on the ER, but I'm,
So
deal with
I'm
your own
saying,
crap.
what
I
are
think
we
we should
gonna
give a blank to
do
walk off the
with
bridge.
the meth problem that we have that's causing the problem crime?
Isn't it true that if the community gets the reputation that they do not tolerate, they're hard on, you're dead if you're caught practically, that those folks move on to another community?
They're what? I'm sorry, the first part?
That the folks move on to another community? Spokane would get to be known as this isn't the place that you want to be cooking meth and doing your drug steals and things that way. So doesn't that really?
I think you have to understand
we
that the
need
meth
to-
problem has been significantly reduced over the last few years because of
Tri-Cities.
because of the, I know, but you're in a place where you see it all the time. In the broader picture, it has been reduced.
Well, I asked
Significantly.
Ozzy about a month ago, I said, what is the #1 problem in Spokane County right now? The thing that's plaguing our county the most? Let me ask you that question. What would you say it is?
Property crime.
He said, one word, oxycodone.
What?
Legalized.
That's not even
That's a drug issue.
Oxy what? Codone.
Well, let me explain to you, let me give you the criminological aspect and then the economical aspect. When you have police resources dedicated to just hammering home the drug trade, you're thinning the herd. And you're creating other people that are going to raise the price of drugs. When you use your manpower to do that, you take it away from enforcing property crimes, and you create this void over here. So criminologically, people who have been doing it are going to do more of it, and people who normally wouldn't have been tempted to do it are going to start doing it. Okay? We got to stop that. It has to do with the management of police resources. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you're hammering drug crime or you're hammering property crime. There has to be a balance between the two, but you can't, because they're going to go out and steal more drugs, because it doesn't matter how much it costs. They're just going to steal more stuff, and it's your stuff.
So I have a question then. What portion of the police department would you divert officers from?
Sheriff's Department.
Yes, which part of the sheriff's department would you divert officers from towards property crime?
Well, we have 2 public information officers right now. I don't believe the sheriff's office needs 2 of them.
Okay, so one officer on the street, that's a huge dent, I see.
Okay, you got 200
I'm asking,
deputies
what is your lowest priority in the police department that you would divert officers from to?
in the sheriff's department.
Same thing, whatever.
I can't-
Sorry if I say it
But
wrong.
I know what
The
you're saying.
sheriff's office.
You've got
What is your lowest priority that you would divert them from?
100 officers now that you have to, by contract, I don't have this, I guess it's around 100, to deliver to the county. They have to be there.
Deliver to,
I mean, to the
Valley?
Valley contract. They have to be there, under contract. When one of them gets out of, when one of them goes off on sick leave, or one of them is administratively taken away, they have to be filled from the unincorporated areas. So you're having to feed that monster right there. Manpower is so low right now, you ask where that's gonna come from. wow, you're gonna have to start thinning the herd a little bit more, taking that one PIO, you're gonna have to take people out of the drug unit, you're gonna have to take people out of some community service, things like that. Some things you can civilianize, create more deputies that way. They're down about 30, 35 deputies. And here's to make it a little bit more bleak. The average age of the deputy right now is about 45?
Between 45.
45 and older. This year, they're eligible, there's about 46 that are eligible to retire this year, and in another 5 years, another 90. So there is going to be a personnel tsunami in the sheriff's office over the next 5 years. Answer your question,
Good chance to get new things.
if we can bring a program in like the one I mentioned at Daytona, I mean, increase the clearance rate 400% just by a typology, not increasing manpower, I think I can do it that way.
My turn again.
Again.
Okay, so way back
Judy,
when.
I had my hand up way before you
No.
Oh, that's why I
did. You said, hang on.
Okay.
And I actually have my hand up.
I had mine out a long time ago.
You quiet.
I want to
You're
know,
quiet.
we were talking about the drug issue here, and you were saying how it's going to start when they first enter the jail system, right? My question to you is, how do you feel about Tent City, and would you ever implement something like that around here?
Is that the bridge people?
No, you're talking about Sheriff Joe. Let me address that.
Oh, I love that
Pink
guy.
underwear.
Sheriff,
I love that guy.
you're talking about those type of, okay,
He's smart.
Yeah, he's not.
there is, I'd like to be the guy that says, you know, that you wear pink jumpsuits and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and all that kind of stuff is good to a certain extent, but when you reach the point where you're gonna humiliate somebody, I don't like that at all. And so, living in a tent, I don't see any real problem with that, as long as it's, I mean, down there, he lives in Phoenix, I can't put someone in a tent in Spokane. I can't do
I
that.
understand that you could do something like that. What I'm asking,
They don't need cable.
would you implement a program like that?
Where they're
Knowing somebody
hurting in
that
jail.
had gone through it and said that they would never drive with
Oh, you're talking about like a boot camp type of thing?
something. Would you
We just don't want them to have
implement
cable TVs and
No.
gyms and.
And I don't think they do that right now. They've got a certain amount of TV, but not cable. But what you're talking about is a boot camp program, right? Kind of like a,
anything? Sure,
Okay.
boot camp.
those, research has shown us that those really don't work. And that might surprise you, but they don't. They have a higher recidivism rate.
I don't think the jail works either.
Well, the good thing is, if I'm able to draw down the jail population, I've got a place to put these people that are hurting us. We don't need to build a new jail. We already have a good one right now. So if I have more space to put those people that are hurting us, and you know, if you've ever been inside the jail,
No.
it's not a nice place. I don't want to go there, okay?
Congratulations.
But it's humane right now. There's a certain level of dignity for somebody who goes there. You gotta understand that the county jail is also filled with people who are awaiting trial, people who haven't been convicted of any crime.
Good.
So we have to have a measure of dignity for these people. Go ahead.
Talking about upholding the Constitution and just states' rights and all that, we actually have an issue right now in Washington that I believe is going to escalate really soon, and that is, we've legalized marijuana here on a state level, which is our state's right or wrong, whether or not you agree with that law. The people passed it, it's our right as a state to do that. But the federal government is still saying, so to me, we're asking all these ambiguous questions. This is a real, I think this is one where we really are gonna be tried on the federal government coming in and saying, we don't want you to have this law.
No, they've already said they're not gonna enforce it.
Yeah, he's backed up.
They have said
Obama's
it.
out in a couple of years.
They have said it, but so I'm just saying, all this ambiguous talk, let's just talk about that issue and the federal government coming in and saying, we don't like your law and we're gonna start closing down shops and convicting people.
It's already happened in Pullman.
Oh, I know, and it's happened in a lot of, Montana, if you fast forward, Montana's already gone through this. So I'm just saying, this is a really good place where we can say, what is our jurisdiction as a state? What is our jurisdiction as a sheriff? How do we get to stand by the laws that our people voted in, and what would that look like for you?
Where's the federal one?
What happened in Pullman? They went in and closed the shops.
Yeah, the sheriff actually stood with
the federal agents.
And closing.
Yeah, and he said that he felt that the state law was too vague for to be understood, so he erred on the side of the federal agents.
The,
You won't get
the
elected.
10th Amendment is not negotiable. We have to take the good with the bad. If they're gonna tell me that you can have marijuana in this state, then any state initiative that has to do with enforcing our Second Amendment rights, we're gonna live with that too. So you gotta take the good with the bad. The 10th Amendment is negotiable. Now, as far as what you're talking about, I don't think that's gonna be the prevailing attitude. I think once this train starts rolling in Colorado and Washington here, you're gonna see states, probably 4 or 5 states by next year do this, and it's gonna happen. And I don't like it, I don't use marijuana, I don't think it's a good thing for this country. The one good thing about it, in fact, the only good thing that's gonna come out of this thing is that we'll be able to study it. And then after about 4 or 5 years, we're gonna find out what the effects are, and are we gonna have the political will to change it?
Or maybe not change it, maybe we find out, I think the reason that I ask is that what I want to do is, I think that's what I need. I want to get behind somebody that I know, that good or bad, if we don't like the state laws here, let's work on changing them. But darn it, if we have passed something as the people, I want somebody that can stand by us and say, that's what we passed, I'm representing this jurisdiction, and this is what we're doing, and you don't have any right to come in and tell us differently.
I want you to understand, though, that I want to have a positive relationship with our federal authorities.
Well, yeah, I mean, that
I
would
want to be the guy that's going to build a coalition around a good issue, okay? I want to have friends, I don't want to have enemies. But
Right.
when you have state law, and I'm not going to stand with the federal government when they want to shut down something that's a law. I'll give you an example here of what we're going to deal with. When I was up at Waspic and they were talking about the drone bill and everything, one of the things they brought up, Mike Ormsby from the U.S. Attorney General's office got up there, and he gave the welcome address, and he kind of, you know what I'm going to talk about here. He kind of had to dance around the issue of this idea that federal law right now is that if you have drugs and you have a gun, you have a mandatory, what is it, 5 years or something like that. That's still a federal law. So these business owners now, they're going to open up these warehouses for marijuana. It's going to be a cash business because a lot of banks aren't really going to want to get involved in this. So these guys are going to have a lot of cash. They're going to be targets for drug grips, and they're going to want to protect themselves. They're going to want to have a gun. Under federal law, they can't.
It's an unconstitutional law.
Exactly. And so he was kind of dancing around it, and it sounded to me like he didn't really want to enforce it. But there were a lot of sheriffs there that were very angry about that. And for local sheriffs and city police departments, you got a felon in possession of a gun, you're going to pop in. That's the way it should be. But we have to be worried about the people abusing our rights, not the ones exercising. And as much as I hate marijuana, if the guy wants to protect his business, he wants to use the gun to do it, that's his right.
Well,
With you.
segues right into my question. Everybody in here, say everybody, I don't know everybody in here, is probably pretty protective of their home. I know I am. Okay? Somebody comes into my abode. Probably the first sound that they're gonna hear is the next sound they're gonna hear is boom. It's an accidental discharge. Right, whatever the case. What's your response as sheriff?
To investigate that and turn it over to the prosecutor's office.
And?
Well, you're going to get to elect a new prosecutor here, you might want to ask him.
Well, I will.
No, we investigate that. Any police agency is going to
He
investigate.
walks into my house, breaks into my house,
There's probably no probable cause there to make an arrest for a felony.
whatever the case.
Right. Are you, I don't see any crime there. I mean, what do you?
Okay, well,
You're a homeowner.
that's the question.
Yeah,
That's the
you're going to
question.
see the sheriff's department investigate something like that, turn it over to the prosecutor's office.
Okay.
I mean, a life has been taken.
Well,
It has to be investigated.
not necessarily.
But that's a justifiable situation,
You can't not investigate.
given the
Well,
information.
as well they should.
You're right, they don't have to, they probably should investigate, but they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to turn it over to the prosecutor's office if there's nothing wrong. I mean,
But
that is
typically,
a,
typically they want to pass the buck because they don't want to make that decision.
and
Is
that's,
that what you're gonna do?
past the buck?
No.
That's a setup.
It is a prosecutor's decision, and it should remain that way. The police do not charge people, they arrest people. The prosecutor charges people. It's their role to do that. That's why you see that these officer-involved shootings turned over to the prosecutor's office. They're the charging authority.
Along these same lines then, is there ever a circumstance that you can foresee or experienced when a civilian has a right to defend themselves from a police officer?
And has there been a situation?
No, I don't care a situation. I mean, is
We
there?
can't deal in what ifs. I mean, you're
Certainly I can. There's 100 no-knock raids a year going on in across the nation. When they come in and they knock on the wrong door and they kick it in and they happen to run into someone who is an armed citizen and he shoots the intruders coming into his house, is that a justified shooting or not?
If the prosecutor says it is, yes. The police are going to investigate that. The prosecutor is the charging authority.
Yeah, true.
There's no, I mean, that's right. I mean, you can't argue that. I'm sorry.
A couple of years ago,
You didn't answer my question though. Does a citizen have a right to defend themselves from a police officer?
Of course.
Like, back off.
Of course the citizen has the right to defend themselves against someone who might assault them.
a couple of years ago, a sheriff, a deputy, was walking across my property, he had 30 acres out there. He was walking across my property. Why is this guy walking across my property? Well, it turned out to be some high school kids hid some dope on my property. Should he have come to my house first and knocked on the door and said, hey, I need to walk across the property?
Is your property posted? Is there signs up?
There is in the driveway, but not all the way around, but still, it's private property.
Well, you can call the sheriff's office, the police department, come out there and put him on trespass notice. They do a report, and then the next time he comes out there, you get him arrested.
But, well, I don't want, that's not where I'm going. Should he have come to the door first? And asked for permission to come across?
Out of courtesy, of course.
That's all I want.
What area are you a detective in? Do you have like a specific, do you investigate?
Sex crimes and exploitation, currently.
My turn.
I just want to make a quick comment, sir,
Oh, my God.
as a detective. Sorry, Judy, it's not a question, it's a quick
I'm
comment.
gonna hear it. Oh, I gotta address it.
Well, it's interesting that you, in the department, I know some of the things that we're bringing up may seem infrequent, some of the situations may seem infrequent, maybe, kind of extreme hypothetical. But as a religious person, I know there are, I hold preachers to a high esteem. And unfortunately, there are a few bad apples who will sexually take advantage of young children. Does that mean does that mean it's not an issue that shouldn't be addressed? No, I think it should be something that we should look out for, even though it's infrequent. So what I'm saying is, individuals with a badge have a lot of responsibility and should be held accountable, just like a preacher of a church. They're leaders of communities as preachers, and I would assume deputy sheriffs would be held in kind of the same esteem. So I guess even though these hypotheticals might seem, off a little bit off the deep end to certain individuals here, I don't think it should be something we just ignore just because it's infrequent. Just
I'm not gonna
because
ignore it.
Okay. Well, it's just a comment. I'm not saying you are. I'm just again, there might be some individuals who think they would dismiss the hypothetical questions we ask, which I still I think they're fair because
Please don't think I'm dismissive. I just want to take it in context.
Okay. All right. And it's not just you. I know there might be some individuals here.
Let me show you with my job. Typically I get a case. If I got 100 cases a year, sex cases, 50% of them will be about children. The other 50% will be custody situations. Mom accusing a dad during a divorce situation. Hardly any of those get prosecuted. I investigate the other 50%. I get about 10 that I think are really good, and probably about 1 or 2 I'll be able to prosecute. That's putting in context my job. And that might astonish you.
No,
but
it doesn't.
It doesn't mean I'm dismissive about all these other cases. It's the reality of what I do.
I'm not astonished. Just like there might be 100,000 preachers, priests, ministers, and maybe 2 or 3 get caught sexually taking advantage of children in their congregation. It doesn't mean I think you know where I'm going
We
with
have,
my
we have a
comment.
great police department, we have a great sheriff's department, and occasionally along the way, we have people that err. They need to be identified, and I think they haven't properly been identified during the hiring process.
Sure. All I'm saying is that, just like I like to hold my preacher to the utmost highest esteem, and even though there's no history in our community of a preacher sexually taking advantage of anyone, it doesn't mean we look out for it and we're proactive and make sure that doesn't happen. And so I just want to make the comment that I think those are fair concerns even here in Spokane County, even though we may not have deputy sheriffs escalating situations. It doesn't mean, we don't ask about that or address that. And I'm not saying you're ignoring it. I'm not saying, you're dismissive. I just think that's, in general, it needs to be looked at with a close eye. Just like if we're gonna, a preacher to every church, make sure he's not molesting someone.
Agreed.
You talked about your job, and you look at, let's say 50% of the cases investigate and end up with possibly 2 that are prosecutable. Of the, let's use a 50 number, of the other 48, how many of those people do you feel in your heart should be prosecuted?
There are some cases I'll have, I'd say like 25% of those cases, where I'll sit down maybe with a child, and I'll say, I'll qualify the child. They say they're years old. I'll qualify them so that they know the difference between the truth and a lie, the moral consequences of telling a lie, and the difference between fantasy and reality. And if I can do that, they're going to be a good witness. With what they tell me, can I corroborate that with evidence? There are sometimes I can talk to children, and I can know that this is happening, but I have got no way of corroborating it.
So I guess what I'm saying is, so there are many cases that don't get prosecuted.
Don't use the word many, some.
Okay, there's some cases that don't get prosecuted. What needs to be changed in order for that to be more aggressively handled within our community? Because I don't think there's a soul here that would condone that kind of behavior.
No, not at all.
And when you
But
look at the damage done to the children, what are we ending up putting out in society a few years later?
the nature of our system, though, is that you're innocent until proven guilty, and that you have to have evidence to convict someone. I prefer it that way, even though it makes my job considerably tough. I work with a group of people that are just really good at what they do, and we do the best job we can, but there are some times where the bear gets you, and you just can't solve every crime. It's heartbreaking, but I try to minimize those.
But her question is, what can we do, or is there a law that needs to be implemented, or?
Yeah, is there something that can be done that can protect the children a little more?
Well, again, this goes back to parents.
Yeah.
It's a parental issue. Law enforcement can only do certain things. It's a parental issue. He's got, Jason. Come on, Judy, give him a problem.
I just want to say you got about 10 minutes left. So we have to be out of here.
I want to hear from someone else.
So,
I want to hear from someone. I got this table up here that's a little silent.
Quiet.
Can you just clarify
Throw me softball.
from your point of view that there's a lot of questions here about feds and claims and all that stuff. Just in your own words, clarify for everybody in an objective way so that everybody isn't just chopping at the bit at you, just how you feel about that, the involvement of the citizens and the federal government compared to the sheriff's department, and how you tie all that together, what your position would be there.
I want to have a healthy relationship with the federal law enforcement. I want to handle things locally, though. I think that we have good state laws, we have good local laws, and I want to use those. I only want to use the federal government as a last resort, and they should be working for us, not with their own purpose or role. They should be doing our bidding. If we have a local need that they can address, I'd like to partner, I'll use the word partner with them to do that. I don't really care for the idea of we know what's best for you. And sometimes I get that from the federal government. I know a lot of good FBI agents here in town. I work with a lot of good guys at the DSHS. I'm running out of time. DSHS, in the exploitation unit. I have a good relationship with them. But they understand that they're, like I dealt with one today, FBI agent called me and said, hey, we got this same case. And he said to me, what are you going to do? And I said, this is what I'm going to do. He says, all right, it's my case. It's a local case. And he said, just give me a call when you get it done. So there wasn't this, well, I'm gonna handle this, you know?
Take it.
So, yeah, so I think the balance is on our side at this point, and I'm gonna make sure it goes that way. And what I wanna do, though, is to be preventative. And I think with dealing with this National Guard issue, I think if you have a sheriff that's gonna fly over to Olympia and sit down with the governor and say, give me 20 minutes, give me a half hour here, this is what we wanna see in our county. What's your feeling? And nail him down on that.
You don't think they'd lie to you?
What if they do? I'm going to
can't nail them
communicate,
down.
I would like to communicate to him how we feel,
Yeah.
okay? And so as long as I'm able to do that, I feel somewhat satisfied. But I think we don't have anybody right now that's gonna be that bold to do that. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, it's our county. This is who we are. We live here, they don't. Go ahead, Susan.
On the previous subject about chasing after somebody who's running across your property, now, if, for the police to go after somebody who is, I used to live in Cypress, California, and there was probably some illegal alien who was running around in the backyard where I was living. And I don't remember if there was a cop chasing after that guy, but I mean, that guy seemed kind of fearful. But anyway, would it be okay for a cop to be going onto your property, chasing after this guy? I mean, this thing about getting your permission, going to your door and saying, it's okay with you if I go on your property looking for this guy? By the time you get permission, this guy is long
If it's
gone.
exigent, the officer has the right to go after the
What?
person. If it's exigent, the officer has a right to go do that. He has a right to do that anyway.
Yeah, okay.
I think what might be I do this a lot when I was out on patrol. I go through a neighborhood, and if I didn't have anything to do, I had a radar gun or something like that. I pull in someone's driveway, I get out and I knock on the door. I come to the door and say, hey, you know, I'm gonna sit out here and run some radar. Do you mind if I use your driveway to sit there? And they go right ahead, you know? And that way you've gotten out of your car, you've made contact with the citizen. They feel great about it.
Well, that's not an emergency situation like I was talking about.
No, and of course the officer's not gonna stop and, oh, I gotta knock on this person's door. I mean, he's gonna handle the situation.
Sure, district's different than 6 and 7.
It's real-
People would actually like an officer and a radar running the driveway?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Really?
Oh, yeah. They love that. I mean, when you're out of your car and you make contact with the citizen, they love that sort of stuff.
Heck, yeah.
Nobody brings it.
Let me just finish. I know
You say no.
I gotta finish here, and I wouldn't be a good politician if I didn't direct you to my donation envelope for everybody. And I'm releasing that stuff up here. My card is up here. But I want to thank you for having me. I realize those are tough questions, and there isn't an answer for every one of them.
You realize you didn't answer any of them.
You did. You didn't let me say
But
one
he
last
did know
thing.
what FEMA was.
Because
I did know.
Doug, do you have time for one more
sheriffs have
question?
taken a lot of heat here, and I have friends that are sheriffs, and by and large, they're pretty good. There maybe are a few that need work on, but I like the police. I'm happy to have the sheriff. So don't go away from here thinking we think y'all are all equal.
No, not at all. Not at all.
You're the good guys, but get rid of the ones who aren't.
Your car door, pull
That's
down,
what
put it down.
Yeah.
Earl's got a
Then what are
question.
you gonna say?
I've got a question I want to go back to. You discussed just briefly, you touched on a leadership style.
Right.
And how that leadership style applied to your opponent and how it did not motivate innovation and mentorship and things of that nature. Discuss your own leadership style and how that would inspire those types of things and how you feel that would translate into a more effective and professional police agency.
If you can take someone and ask them, I mean, we all want to be asked and not told. If I can come to work and say, here are the goals we want to accomplish together, how can I help you do that? That's what a supervisor does or an administrator does, is they provide the resources for the employee to be able to do that, not I'm going to tell you what to do. We need a sheriff that's going to motivate people in that way to inspire them and mentor them. I think what's going on right now is this idea, I'll give you a good example. How many of you saw 2 or 3 days ago the deputy that's been off on leave, the news story? Okay, Garrett Johnson. Right away, and the issue was that the officer's been off and that his position may need to be filled pending his evaluation. That's the issue.
You mean the one who's
What?
drunk?
No. What did the sheriff say? He's a discipline problem. there was a personal reference. And there wasn't any discipline problem. And when you have a lot of that, when you keep hearing, whenever there's a disagreement, or I disagree with the sheriff, or, oh, you're a discipline problem, you're a liar, you're wrong. You hear that every time from that person. You can't hear that all the time. After a while, people turn you off. And I think that's what's happened down there now, is they've turned him off. Because everyone's lying, everyone's wrong, and they're just going up. And that's simply not true.
One last thought. What's your relationship with Stacy Coles?
The newspaper owner? I met him one time and had a 20-second conversation with him. Why?
How about Betsy?
I had never met her.
Okay.
I met him at it was a children's, families with parents and children there, that little place that we used to interview children. He was there because he somehow partnered with it. I shook hands with him and talked with him for about 20 seconds. That's it. All right, thank you for having me. I need a drink of water.
So, Douglas, you didn't say this, you're having a debate next Wednesday?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Wednesday night, the 15th, at City Hall, I'm debating the sheriff. It's being hosted by a Democratic club. I don't know their exact name.
League of Women Voters?
Pardon me?
League of Women Voters?
No. It's the 6th District Democrat Club or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But they're hosting City Hall there, the venue, and it's going to be me and Ozzy debating.
That was
I think you'll do well.
Wednesday at 6:30.
Is it, are you two the only ones running at this point?
So far.
Oh, yeah.
I've only heard one other name, but that hasn't
So I
materialized.
already know what the Democratic Club's agenda is.
Somebody around here?
They want somebody.
I've heard this, and it's just a rumor, but the WSP sergeant, Slim. That's all I've heard, though. He was during the drug raid, he shot the pregnant woman. That's all I know about him.
Oh, I know. I know.
Okay, that's what I heard. He's been telling people that, but he hasn't filed public disclosure.
Yeah, let's just go on. Okay.